Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of society's most fundamental building blocks, the family. It's a word we all think we know, right? But the reality, well, it's way more complex and honestly, pretty surprising than you might imagine. Yeah, when you hear the word family, what do you picture? For a lot of us, an image just pops right into our heads. Maybe it's a nostalgic picture from our own childhood or a scene from a classic TV show. But here's the thing sociologists are asking. Does that picture, that traditional image, actually match up with what family life looks like today? Okay, so let's get into it. And to really understand what's going on, we first have to agree on what we're even talking about. Because believe it or not, the definition itself is where the whole puzzle begins. And boom, right out of the gate, we see a huge difference. You've got the US Census Bureau with this very structured, kind of legalistic definition. You're related by blood, marriage, or adoption, period. But then you look at how sociologists see it, and it's much broader. They talk about a kinship system, a recognized social unit. That opens the door for all sorts of different family structures. And you know, what we think as normal for a marriage, it is definitely not a global standard, not even close. Sure, here in the US, monogamy, that's marriage between two people, is the only legal form. But in other cultures, you'll find polygyny, which is one husband and multiple wives, or, much less common, polyandry, one wife with multiple husbands. It just goes to show there is no single right way to form a family. And looking back through history, another huge piece of the family puzzle has been this imbalance of power. It's a system called patriarchy, and it's basically where men hold the primary authority. We're talking about something that was written into law for centuries, and its influence on family roles, yeah, we still feel that today. Okay, so we've got the definitions down. Now let's get to the numbers. Because honestly, the story of the American family over the last 70 years or so is just one of massive, undeniable change. And wow, this one chart just lays it out so clearly. This is one of the biggest shifts of all. Think about it. Back in the 1950s, people were tying the knot in their early 20s. Fast forward to today, and that median age has shot up to the late 20s for women and 30 for men. We are waiting to get married way longer than our grandparents' generation ever did. So, why are people waiting? This chart gives us a huge clue. When you ask American adults what's really important for a fulfilling life, look what comes out on top. An enjoyable career at 71%. And close friends are right up there at 61%. Now look at marriage and kids, down at 23 and 26%. That is a gigantic shift in what we, as a culture, prioritize. So if people aren't rushing to get married, what are they doing? Well, they're moving in together. Cohabitation, living together, it used to be pretty rare, kind of taboo even. Now, it's the new normal. For younger adults, it's become the majority experience, totally changing the road to marriage, or in some cases, becoming the destination itself. And when it comes to divorce, the story isn't as simple as you might hear. The headline number, the overall rate, has actually dropped to a 40-year low. But look closer. We're seeing this explosion of what's called gray divorce. For people over 50, the rate has doubled since 1990. For those over 65, it's tripled. So while younger people are divorcing less, older couples are splitting up like never before. Of course, all of these shifts, the divorces, the changing family structures, they have a massive impact on kids. Today, roughly 1 out of every 4 children in the United States lives with just one parent. And get this, that's the highest rate of kids in single-parent homes in the entire world. Okay, so we've seen the what. The numbers are clear. But the really big question is why? Why is all this happening? And what kinds of challenges does it create for families today? Well, sociologists have a few different ways of looking at this, kind of like different lenses. You've got 3 main perspectives here. A functionalist might look at all this and worry, right? They see traditional marriage as something that keeps society stable, so its decline could be seen as a problem. Then you have the conflict and feminist perspectives. They look at the family and see a site of inequality, a power struggle over things like money and, yes, housework. And finally, the symbolic interactionist. They're all about meaning. They'd say, hey, maybe divorce isn't a failure. Maybe it's a sign that we now expect our marriages to make us happy. And this quote just nails that last idea. It's saying that marriage has transformed. It went from being this formal institution, for social stability, to something more about companionship. And now, it's become this deeply personal pact that's supposed to meet our individual psychological needs. The bar for what makes a good marriage is just so much higher now. Now remember that conflict perspective? One of the biggest issues they point to is something called the second shift. Here's what it means. Even when both parents have jobs outside the home, studies show again and again that women come home to a second job of childcare and housework. And that imbalance is a huge source of stress and conflict in a relationship. And when you zoom in on specific challenges, like teen pregnancy, the numbers are just staggering. The rate in the US is 16 per thousand. Now look at Canada, 7. And Denmark, less than 2. That's not a small difference. It points to fundamentally different social approaches when it comes to things like sex ed and access to contraception. All right, this brings us to the big finale. If families have changed this much, how can society catch up? How do we adapt to actually support families in all their different shapes and sizes today? Well, experts point to a few key areas. First, expanding our legal definitions to recognize things like domestic partnerships. That's about acknowledging that commitment doesn't always come with a marriage certificate. Second, improving family planning. That's a direct response to what we saw with the teen birth rates. It's about giving people more control. Third, real economic support, like affordable childcare. That tackles the second shift head-on. And finally, preventing domestic violence, making sure our homes are the safe havens they're supposed to be. And speaking of making homes safe, here's a really interesting point of contrast. Back in 1979, Sweden was the first country to ban spanking. Today, 66 countries have completely banned corporal punishment. But in the United States, it is still legal for parents in all 50 states. That shows a really deep cultural and policy divide. And so that's where we'll leave it, with this question to think about. The family is not some unchanging, static thing. It's alive, it's evolving. The data is crystal clear. The modern family is less about a single, rigid structure and more about a flexible journey toward personal fulfillment. The real challenge now is for all of us, for our laws, our workplaces, our communities, to evolve right along with it.